Okay, we are Marla, Alejandra, and Estefania, and we're going to talk about The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. It's a book that was written in the 1960s, and it talks about Peccola, Breedlove, that's the main character, and we have Frieda and Claudia McTeer. Frieda and Claudia's parents adopt Peccola after her dad tries to burn down their house. And Peccola is a very troubled girl because she thinks that since she's black and her eyes are not blue, she's not beautiful, and that's the reason why her parents hate her. So she grows up in a very violent environment, and she thinks that her parents don't love her because she doesn't have blue eyes. So once her father is out of prison, she goes back with her family, but there are a lot of problems because her father is he's a drinker, and her mom hates her family because there's a lot of violence in her house. So her mom is working as a housemaid for a white family, and her mom prefers to be at the white people's family than at her own home. And then one day, Peccola's father rapes Peccola, and this is like the climax of the story because he gets drunk, he goes home, and then he rapes Peccola. And when Peccola tells her mom, since her mom hates her so much, she doesn't believe her. So Peccola gets pregnant, and she starts to become crazy since she's just an 11-year-old girl. She starts to go crazy and imagine she has an imaginary friend. She goes out of school, she doesn't go to school anymore, and then she starts to get obsessed with having blue eyes, so she starts to pray, she goes with a priest. She thinks that by doing something, God will listen to her and she'll have blue eyes, and then she'll be beautiful, and then she will be loved by her mother. So she goes crazy, and she starts to believe she actually has blue eyes and that everyone in town is jealous of her because God listened to her. So she becomes so isolated that people in town started gossip, and they find out she's pregnant, and she has the baby, but she ends up mentally ill, and she ends up alone. There are a lot of references in the book about flowers because she loses the baby once, and then she gets pregnant again by her father. It's it has a lot of confusion because she's raped twice by her father. So the characters, as we said before, Claudia and Frieda, that are two African-American girls and their sisters. And Claudia hates light-skinned people. And once in the book, they talk a lot about dolls. She says that she hates dolls because they portray beauty that is not as their own beauty. And they're white dolls with blue eyes, and that's why Peccola is so obsessed with having blue eyes, because she grew up with the standard of white beauty. So as we said before, Peccola is the main character, and she's a very, very troubled girl because of the violent environment she lived in. And then Mr. Breedlove is Peccola's father. Since he was little, he lived in a very violent environment too. And that's why he has drinking problems, and he rapes his daughter, and he hits his wife. And then we have Mrs. Breedlove, that's Peccola's mother, and she's very unhappy and hates her life, and she blames Peccola for all of her unhappiness. She says that it's her daughter's fault.
You said he's...
Cool.
Mr. Breedlove is Peccola's dad, real dad. And Mrs. Breedlove is real mother.
Yeah, but Mr. Breedlove is not white.
No,
they're both black.
No. Okay.
They're all black.
They're all black. So the setting.
I'm gonna talk about that. Well, the story gets its development in the late 60s, and well, it's a really poor neighborhood. I don't know if you know about segregation, but after slavery was abolished in United States, the states were actually really mad about it, so they made a law that said segregated but equal. That means that black people should be with different education system, with different different everything, like a different city, but they were equal. But the thing is that things were not really equal. The education system was really poor in the black neighborhoods because they didn't put any money on it, and it was a situation where black people were not slaves anymore, but they lived like they were. They lived free, but not that. But the freedom was not real. One of the most important things of this book is the meaning of bitterness. In the 60s, United States was going through a really hard time because of the next war they were going to have, that it's the Cold War, because of the situations they have with the Soviet Union, and because of the last war. It was a really hard time for them, so they had to make a nationalist feeling on their people. I mean, they had to gather all the different cultures that were living in the United States. And one way of doing it was by having a stereotype of bitterness and of the American dream, that was basically blue eyes, light skin, good economic situation. That's why they were all so obsessed with being like that, because they needed a nationalist feeling for the people to gather in one nation to fight against the situation the United States was going through. So, am I making myself clear? I feel like I'm not. Yes, I am. Okay. So that's why the bitterness was a really important topic back then. Black people didn't feel like, okay, we are the black people, but we are good, we are together, we have opportunities, we're gonna live together. They didn't like it to be black. They wanted to be the white people. They wanted to have those opportunities and to have that life.
For example, there's a lot of bullying in the story. In the same school that Pecola went to, kids made fun of her because she was black, but kids were black too, so they hated each other just because they were black. So there was a lot of hate and violence, even if they were kids. There's a lot, the nigger word, it's written several times in the story. The same kids that were black called Pecola a nasty little nigger, and a Latin nasty negro, stuff like that. So there was a lot of hate.
The thing is that black people didn't feel proud of being black. Mm-hmm. It was a very controversial thing for them to be. It wasn't like us when we say we're Mexican and we like it and those things. They were not like that. They didn't have that feeling about themselves. And that's basically the social background of the story that is very, very, very unfortunate.
And then, as we said before, in the plot, the climax is when Pecola is raped by her father and she gets pregnant, and people in town start to gossip about her, and they have this judgment and this fallacy. They believe that she will become a prostitute because there were a lot of prostitutes in town. They say since she's pregnant, she won't go to school anymore and she will be a prostitute later in life. So this is like a very important topic in the story too. And she also, the obsession she had with having blue eyes, that she goes crazy and she has an imaginary friend, and she becomes so isolated that she doesn't even speak with her friends anymore, or even with her mother. And then, as Stefania said, the cultural black background in the 60s, there was the Black is Beautiful movement, and African American people suffered from racism and segregation, and issues such as incest, prostitution, domestic violence, and molestation were very common in black communities. And even as we said before, there was a lot of racism between the same African American people. So there was no unity in those communities.
Well, the novel is written by Toni Morrison. She was an American woman born in Ohio in February 18, 1931. She is 84 years old now and she's still working at the Princeton University as professor. Well, she's an American novelist, editor, and now is professor. She has write a lot of novels. Her most important ones are Song of Solomon, Beloved, The Bluest Eyes, and Zola. She won the Nobel Prize in 1993 by the novel Beloved, and a lot of other prizes like Pulitzer Prize in 1998 and the American Book Award in 1995. And most of her stories are based in the racism theme because she suffered from racism when she was young. And also her novels are very known for being so completely in terms of characters and dialogues between them, and for using like a very beautiful language, not necessarily poetic, but very beauty because she uses a lot of metaphors and rhetorical techniques.
Okay, so in one interview, the author stated that she based the story of the Bluest Eye in a real event that happened in her childhood, that she remembered one of the girls in school that said she wanted to have blue eyes because they meant beauty. So the author wanted to portray events that happened typically in the 1960s between the African American girls, and she portrays a cruel reality that was very common at that time, that was violence, racism, and incest. And I think that's it. Yeah.